And so we are going to start the show in 3, 2, 1.
Now, there is one rule I insist be obeyed while you are in my house. No growing up. Stop this very instant. And that includes you, Mr. Chairman of the Board Banning.
Sorry, too late, Gran.
And what is so terribly important about your terribly important business?
Okay, record now. Let's go.
Hello and welcome. Welcome and hello. This is Wait, You Haven't Seen? It's a show where we talk about movies, and specifically, we talk about a movie at least one of us has never seen before. I'm your host, Travis, a.k.a. TV's Travis. This is episode number 216, and our movie this week is 1991's Hook. And here to talk to me about it, because you hadn't seen it before, from the So Wizard podcast, is Joey. How you doing?
What's going on, everybody? It's great to be here. It was a little tough picking another movie I hadn't seen, but I pulled one out of the hat, and here we are.
All right, so you had not seen this movie before. Did you just did it pass you by when you were growing up? Because you seem about the same age as me, but I'm right about the right time, I feel.
I don't know how old you are, but I'm probably older than you. And I never saw it. You know, it came out in 1991. You know, I was a freshman in high school, and
Okay.
I just think it just was one of those things. I just didn't see it. I was not going really to the movies with my parents anymore. I was more going with my friends, and we weren't going to go see this
Sure.
based on the trailers and everything about it. It looked like a kid's movie, which nowadays I wouldn't care. I'd go see a cool kid's movie. It doesn't really matter. But when you're like 14, 15, you're like, I'm not going to see some kid's movie.
Right.
That's for babies. So we more than likely just skipped it for that reason. And I've heard so many people love this movie. I know the guy that plays Rufio is at cons all the time, and people are losing their absolute minds over it. And I've never seen it. And it's tough because I see everything. So like when it's on a few years ago, we did Jaws. That was easy because everybody always was up my butt about having never seen Jaws. Whereas with this one, I just, I had to pick something. I'm like, man, I have never seen Hook. And it just kind of was like, that's the one. That's the one. I got to sit down and watch this. I've never seen it. So
Sure. So I had, I'm a couple years younger than you. I would have been right around 10, 11 when this came out. So not too much younger, but I was kind of right in the wheelhouse of this movie when it came out. I don't remember seeing it in the theater. I may have, but I know I saw it at home. I watched it a lot at home. I was even at this point, I was a big Robin Williams fan. Then there was this and Fern Gully and Aladdin kind of all in a row, right in that age where I was glomming on to everything sort of crazy comedy too. And I really liked his energy. And, the Peter Pan story, I think everybody has at least heard of that story, even if you're not super familiar with it. The ins and outs, you sort of know the boy who never grew up and Captain Hook and all of that. So it was right in my wheelhouse. And the funny thing is this movie was critically panned. The critics didn't like it. It made a good amount of money, but it was also a very expensive movie at the time. What I'm curious about, though, is now that you've seen it almost 40 years after it came out, which is also just a crazy thing to think about. This movie's 32 years old now? So
sure, yeah.
A little over 30 years after it came out.
You're making me feel real old.
Hey, I'm not. I told you, I'm not that far behind you.
Okay, that's good. I mean, with this show, we're totally hip and cool. We're down with the youth, so
Exactly. We know what the kids are doing these days with
We're on
their
the cutting
TikToks
edge.
and So now that you've watched it, what did you think of it as a movie?
I didn't like it at all. Oh man, it reminded me of. It kind of gave me an existential crisis, I think, actually, because it made me think of, man, all those times I grabbed the kids and I'm like, we got to watch this. We got to watch this movie. Let's watch Last Starfighter. Let's watch The Last Dragon. Let's watch this. Let's watch that. All these movies I loved as a kid. And I'm like, you got to watch these. It's so awesome. And I'm like, man, is this how they feel when somebody makes them watch something that they loved as a kid? And they're just like, man, this movie kind of sucks. I don't know what to say. I just was not a fan at all. Yeah.
So, are you much of a fan of like the story of Peter Pan or any of those kind of adaptations of that? Does that have anything for you?
Like anybody, we've all seen the animated movie when we were kids,
Mm-hmm.
and I mean, that's about as far as it gets. I don't sit around dressing up like Peter Pan and jumping out windows or anything like that.
That's
You know,
not a
I'm
regular
a
like
Disney...
Thursday night for you.
No, and I'm not a Disney adult, that type of thing either. Like I like Disney, but I was never, even as a kid, I was never a big like Disney movie, Disney animated kind of guy.
Sure.
I'm old, so I veered towards more like cartoons like G.I. Joe, Transformers, Thundercats. Like that was my thing, not Disney stuff. So I was never a big Disney guy. I know the stories and I've seen the movies. I've probably seen most of them in the theater when I was a kid, but I just wasn't a big Disney guy. So,
okay.
I mean, I know the gist of it. You know?
Right. And this was a TriStar picture. So the story of this getting made.
TriStar Pictures.
Yeah. There's a name that you don't hear very much anymore. It's
you
an
see that
interesting...
horse come running around the corner and you're just like, here we go.
It's an interesting story of how this got started, because Spielberg initially wanted to do a Peter Pan movie in like the early 80s. Kind of off the heels of Temple of Doom, in part because he had done E.T. and he had done Close Encounters and Jaws, and there was and then when he did something off of Temple of Doom, that one of the criticisms of that was it had lost some of that kind of childlike wonderment to some of his work. And he
which is weird to me, because I remember watching Temple of Doom as a kid and I thought it was awesome. So I guess there was backlash, which is weird to think of backlash in like the early 80s, which would have been like newspaper articles 3 weeks after the movie came out.
Right.
Like, I always remember as a kid, I thought it was awesome. So I never understood when people are like, oh, this is terrible. This isn't a good movie for kids. I'm like, wow, this movie rules.
Sure. I mean, in some ways, if you showed this to somebody and told them that the critics panned it, that it was like a below 30%, I think, aggregate Rotten Tomatoes in terms of like positive and negative, I don't know that somebody would necessarily believe that, because there's nothing, I wouldn't call anything in this like, oh, this is a terrible movie, nobody's going to like it. You not liking is completely different. That's it just didn't connect with you kind of thing. But like, it feels like a pretty well-made movie. Right.
Yeah, it's not, I don't dislike it because it's bad. This isn't like, I'm saying this is like The Room or like something like that. It's just, it didn't work for me. Like that's
sure.
completely different level of dislike.
But it was one of those things. Spielberg really connected with Peter Pan as a kid. It was a story that his mom would read to him when he was a young kid. And so he wanted to make this movie, and then he got kind of caught up. He had his first son, and sort of gave up on that idea for a little while. And he went away from it, and he started working on, that's when he started doing things like The Color Purple and some of his mid-'80s things. And meanwhile, as that was going on, a screenwriter started writing his own sequel to Peter Pan. And through a confluence of things, it ended up that that sequel became Hook, The Return of the Captain. And they started moving forward with that. And it's funny you mentioned The Last Starfighter, because Nick Castle, the director of The Last Starfighter, was directing this movie. It had gotten to the point where they were doing that, and he ended up... The story goes that the studio wanted Spielberg. Spielberg wanted nothing to do, apparently, with like removing a director from a project. But the producer was like, well, it's too late. We already did it. He was having creative differences with Robin Williams and Dustin Hoffman, so you're in. So we almost had Nick Castle directing this movie, which is interesting to me. I'm kind of curious what Michael Myers would have done directing this. But they bring in Steven Spielberg. This also led to his fallout of his friendship with Michael Jackson, because apparently the rumors were that Michael Jackson was going to play Peter Pan for a long time in the Spielberg movie. I don't know that there was any real like truth to that, but those were rumors that were going on. This is the 80s, so this is pre-internet, so rumors can spread in a very different way back then, because you had even less to substantiate a rumor in the 80s. It's just somebody told me at a party. Could you imagine this
movie, though? Could you imagine this movie with Michael Jackson in the main role?
No, I really can't.
It might be a classic for a different reason at that point.
Very much so, because I think... Now, I have a very fond memory of this. In part, there's a lot of nostalgia involved in that, and I will freely admit to that. But for me, watching it this time around, because I haven't watched it in a few years, and so the nostalgia was there. But also for me, it was the performances of Robin Williams and Dustin Hoffman that for me made this work, because Robin Williams is a perfect casting to play a grown-up Peter Pan, because he has the energy of a child, and he has the dramatic chops to play something, to play an older adult as well. But he also, not only does he have the energy to be a kid, like Jim Carrey has the energy to be a kid, right? There's a lot of actors that can have that energy, but there's something in Robin Williams' eyes that looks very innocent when he wants to. And there's that scene where the little kid is like touching his face and looking into his eyes and all that. And you like, I literally watched him go from being an adult to a kid staring back at this little boy in that scene. And that's what for me worked, was just seeing, because you get that childlike wonderment in his face, and it's just perfect. Like there's so few people that can do what Robin Williams did in this role. So that works. And then, you juxtapose that with Dustin Hoffman going full method acting, and like, I think he stayed in his accent the whole time, which is hilarious. I saw some behind the scenes stuff where he's like spouting out and he's still using that same voice, and it just cracked me up. I'm like, man, that would hurt my throat after a while, because that was kind of gravelly. But I just feel like there's a lot of whimsy and wonder in this movie, and then the sets they built were nuts. Like the fact that it's all shot on sound stages, and the ship that they built, because they built a Jolly Roger that was almost full size, like just crazy big. So, and then you see Dustin Hoffman, who, he's the title character of this Hook, even though he's not in it nearly as much as Peter. The story's really about Peter. But what I also liked about this, and I remember thinking this even kind of in my younger days, not so much when I first saw it, because when I'm 10, 11, 12, I'm just like, oh, it's a fun movie. But as I got older, I thought, well, that's kind of cool to think of. I'm always fascinated with stories that expand on a known story and go give you some more. And in this case, it's, well, Peter Pan grew up and he became a dad himself. And what sort of happened there? Like, it's kind of neat to follow that thread and see what that was. And seeing him become basically the complete opposite of who Peter Pan was when he became an adult. Peter Banning is kind of, he's not a great dad. He's a workaholic, and he's not Peter Pan in any way, shape, or form.
Right.
Which is, to me, interesting in a story sense, as long as you can tell something that grabs your attention. And I think taking his kids and making that the tension of now he has to go and rescue his kids from Captain Hook, who in this world, this Captain Hook is not afraid to kill children either.
Yeah.
Which, that was one of the things I'd forgotten. I'd forgotten how rough this movie could get. Like, this was for, it's PG-13, and it's very PG-13 because it goes places that you don't expect a movie about Peter Pan really to go.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was written-ish mostly in the 80s. So in the 80s, they didn't have issues putting kids, for the most part, in danger and stuff. I mean, I think as we got older, as movies went on and they got more kids movies became kiddie movies for the most part. You don't see anything like Monster Squad or Goonies or even this nowadays where kids are in legitimate danger.
Yeah, and movies that are not afraid to scare kids either, like the Boo box that they put that pirate in the beginning. That's terrifying.
Yikes.
They dropped that. They locked that pirate in a box and threw some scorpions in with him. Which, by the way, so I don't know if that pirate looked at all familiar to you or not, but there were some good cameos in this movie, and that's one of the better ones.
Who was that?
That pirate was played by Glenn Close. And I took note of some of these cameos, because obviously Robin Williams, Dustin Hoffman, Glenn Close is one of the pirates. David Crosby is a pirate.
Yes, I noticed that.
That was great. Did you notice Jimmy Buffett? Jimmy Buffett was a pirate.
I did
too.
notice Jimmy Buffett, and I read afterwards that George Lucas was in there somewhere too. So
George Lucas and Carrie Fisher are when Tinkerbell takes Peter, wraps him up in the sheet, and like flies him to Neverland, and they go over that bridge, and there's just fairy dust falling off of it, and then that couple that's standing on the bridge starts to float. That was George Lucas and Carrie Fisher.
Oh, now you're gonna make me go back and watch the movie again.
And you can't tell. Like, it's blink and you miss it. But part of why Carrie Fisher was there was also because she did some uncredited rewrites on the script. She did some, which she did a lot at that time. and she was punching up the dialogue for Tinkerbell, and played by Julia Roberts, who famously almost got fired from the movie because her marriage to Kiefer Sutherland, her engagement got called off, and she like disappeared to Ireland while they were filming. It's like, good Lord.
I forgot she was ever even engaged to Kiefer Sutherland.
Right?
I hate Julia Roberts so much. So that was like, that was already a check mark against the movie right there.
She got a Razzie nomination for this movie.
I don't think she was that bad. But
no,
yeah,
I don't think she was that
Julia
bad
Roberts
either.
guy, but yeah.
And Julia Roberts is one of those actors that you either love or hate. Like, I don't know anybody that's sort of lukewarm on her. They either think she's amazing or like you just can't stand her. I used to not like Julia Roberts at all. And I watched Pretty Woman for the first time sometime in the last year. They all blur together anymore. I was really surprised with how much I liked her in that movie. And I have no reason to have liked her in that movie. So it was one of those where I'm like, I'm kind of coming around on her not being awful. She wasn't great in this movie, but I didn't think she was Razzie worthy at all.
Definitely not Razzie worthy. I just have never been a Julia Roberts fan. To me, it's because when her movies were coming out, I was like at a certain age where like my mom and my sister would rent them.
Mm-hmm.
And then it would be like, damn, like whatever we were going to rent for movies, like they picked a movie that I'm not interested in. And it always seemed to involve Julia Roberts. So it's like, Pretty Woman, I don't want to watch that. Or Sleeping with the Enemy, I'm all set, you know? So I just had a bad taste in my mouth from Julia Roberts. It's just carried on for the rest of my life.
I was the same way for a long time. I didn't care about Pretty Woman. I didn't care about any of the rom-coms. None of that was to me interesting. But I will say Pretty Woman a lot better than I thought it was. Like, I enjoyed that way. Maybe I'm just getting to be a softie and like everything now. I don't know. But I was surprised at how much I enjoyed that.
I'm going to take your word for it. I'm not going to revisit it. So.
Fair. That's fair. But yeah, those were some fun little cameos in there I thought were great. The David Crosby one, I completely forgot he was in this whatsoever. And he's so noticeable because he's right there. He's right up front at one point in one of the scenes. So yeah. And so I love that. And of course, Bob Hoskins as Smee. And he might be my favorite thing in this entire movie. Is Smee. There's something about, like, I first of all love Bob Hoskins, period, like just full stop, but he's playing Smee. You can tell how much fun he is having playing Smee. Like, I love the scene where he's just stuffing treasure into his pants.
Yep.
And everyone comes in the room and he doesn't stop, and then you don't see him again for like 10 minutes in the movie. And the next time you see him come out, his clothes are bursting at the seams and he can barely move. He's just taking all that treasure and heading out. I love that. But his interactions with Dustin Hoffman were really, as Hook, were really interesting too.
Yeah, I think if there's anything that I would give the movie huge kudos to is Robin Williams, Dustin Hoffman, Bob Hoskins. A lot of the name actors in this seem to be giving 110% in a kids movie, and you could tell it's one of those things. And you, because we watch a million movies, you can always tell like the levels of the skill of the actors sometimes is noticeable. And in this one, you could tell like the name actors in this are up here, and they're up here. I don't know if it's because it was Spielberg, so he's going to pull the best out of him and they're going to give him their best. Maybe if it was the other guy directing, they may have just phoned it in because it's like, who's this guy? Who cares? But you know, you got a legend at that point. He's already a legend directing. Right. They're giving 110%, and it's all on the screen, regardless of how I felt about everything else in the movie. You could see their performances are another level. So I liked all the name people in this movie, even like old Wendy, like all the people that you recognize in this movie as people that have been in other stuff. They're all top tier in this. So.
Okay, so one more cameo, and then I got to talk about Wendy. So another cameo was Phil Collins.
Like Phil Collins, the singer.
Yeah, he's the police detective that comes to the house.
Like, I didn't notice that at all
and
either.
That was originally a longer scene they cut down for pacing. He had more dialogue and stuff like that. And we'll get to the pacing in a little bit because I have some things.
I was just gonna say they cut something for pacing in this. I'm surprised.
Wendy is played by Maggie Smith. Now, Maggie Smith, amazing actor for forever. I blame Hook for the reason why I have always thought of her as a like frail old woman. Because if you see her in this, how old do you think she was when they made this movie? Because she's playing a character that's 92.
So she's probably like in her 80s.
She is 56 years old when they made this movie. But I can't, like, I never, outside of, she was in a movie that I love that hardly anybody's ever seen called Murder by Death. It's it's a mid-70s murder mystery in the vein of Clue, the movie. It's a silly, farcical one like that. And she's in that. She's much younger there. And Maggie Smith was absolutely gorgeous. But I only think of her as that character, or then from Hook forward, where I just think of her as this old woman. And
I'm going to be the same way. I only think of her as like an elderly woman. Like she was born, she came out of her mom's lady parts, as like an 80-year-old woman.
and that's a testament
it's a hell
to
of a birth, but
but it's a testament to the makeshow that they gave her for this to age her 40-something years, and it worked.
And she looks just like she does when she's actually old. So
yeah, exactly. Really that's talk about a mirror into
like
the
she
future.
walked right off the set of Downtown Abbey 2 or something. You know?
And I loved having her in that role because again, you're getting the story of like Peter's old. Peter's in his 40s now. He's no longer the kid. She still remembers the Peter Pan character. She's never lost any of that memory. But here's Wendy, who got to go on these grand adventures and then slowly got older and older. But you find out that she just stayed a wonderful, caring, nurturing person her entire life. And I will admit that, and again, this is probably just me getting older and being a far more emotional person. The scene where Peter is giving the speech at the dinner for her as they're dedicating the wing of that hospital, like that scene's meant to be emotional, and maybe it's just Spielberg is good at that, but I started to choke up when like everybody started standing up and you realized they were all orphans that this woman helped.
Yeah.
And I was just like, oh, damn it, Spielberg. Damn you. You're so good at getting emotion out of me. Plus, I did see Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 yesterday, so I'm already a little raw-nerved from that.
You're afraid. You're very afraid today.
I am. It's been rough. But yeah, I loved the performances, like you said, from all the named actors. They were just great. The kids weren't terrible either, which when you have that many kids in a scene and they're playing Lost Boys, that had to have been utter chaos to try and film. I can't imagine what that was like. But these kids were really good. Led by Dante Basco as Rufio, who, as you said, he goes to a lot of the conventions and all that. I was actually part of a film festival. The only 2 feature-length films in it were the one that we made, my friends and I made in, I guess it would have been our senior year of high school / like right after we graduated, and a movie that Dante Basco was in.
Oh, wow.
So that was kind of fun to be. We were the only 2 entrants, and I think they ended up not giving a prize for feature-length because of that, but like, that was cool. I got to sit and watch another movie that he had done. I like Rufio a lot. And in fact, this movie, kind of going back to what we were talking about, where movies from like the 80s and 90s, especially the 80s, kids movies were willing to put kids in risk and take chances and scare kids. Yeah. I mentioned this way back when I did what's the Henson movie?
Labyrinth?
Well, Labyrinth was one, but Dark Crystal. I don't know why I couldn't think of that. Like, Henson always thought that it wasn't a bad thing to scare kids.
Right.
To
an extent.
To a point,
parent,
yes.
Yes. I always was trying to find, when my kids were younger, I always would try to find those type of movies, TV shows, and stuff that would challenge them a little bit. I didn't want to scar them for life, but you want to challenge them a little bit. Not everything needs to be Trolls World Tour. So
exactly, but like Henson was good at that. Don Bluth, I think, really towed that line with stuff like Secret of Nim and American
Sometimes
Tail.
It went over it. I think
Sure.
What was it, Land Before Time, where their mom dies?
Yeah, Land Before Time is a little tough.
You go jump off a bridge now. Thanks a lot.
But there was something about that you're right. It's sort of, we got away from that for quite a while, where it wasn't nobody was taking those risks. Hook does that, and Rufio is the character. He's the one lost boy that we not only see, like we hear Hook talk about he's killed so many lost boys, and he's talking about killing Peter Pan, but we literally see him stab Rufio in the chest. And I forgot, like, that's rough. That's not easy.
Yeah.
And I remember as a kid, that was not an easy scene to watch. And because it happened so quickly, you know, he's got the upper hand. I have a sound clip of him because I use the line all the time where he's got Hook's sword down and he says, "Looky, looky, I got Hooky." And before you can even like cheer for that line, he's getting stabbed in the chest and Rufio's dead. And I was just like, I'm remembering that as I'm watching it this time, like, oh man, that was a little traumatizing when I was a kid.
Well, it's nice to get a little bit of danger in there too, so you're not 100% sure if everyone's going to make it out at that point.
Sure.
So I mean, obviously, you know, it's a family kids movie. There's not Captain Hook isn't going to win by wholesale slaughtering Peter Pan and his family, but you know, we at least get an into danger in there. So.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And you know, it is like it's good from a purely storytelling standpoint too. It's good to have those stakes going on. I also completely...
I was surprised they didn't bring him back either. So I expected, you know, maybe by the end of the movie, some magic will come and bring him back or something. But no, he's just dead. Yeah,
they just did that, and when Peter
they
leaves,
do anything with his body either? Like the whole rest of the movie kept going on.
No, they sort of
up there on the ship.
They sort of had that moment and then kind of just forgot about him. Like, yeah, Rufio's fine.
Yep.
He's
still laying on the ground over there to this day.
Thudbutt will take care of it. He's the new leader.
Yeah.
Which that was a cool scene, and I learned just recently that was that Robin Williams and Steven Spielberg knew what the outcome was going to be of that whole scene where he chooses, but none of the kids were told ahead of time.
No.
So all their reactions are really genuine, and I thought that was that's a cool way to do that scene. To get what you want out of your actors is just let that be a natural thing. So the kids are like, who is it going to be? We don't know. And
right. And there's just the skill of Spielberg on display again. So,
yeah. You know. And he picks Thudbutt, which is the best name, I think, ever.
Yeah.
Although, another one was one of the Lost Boys is credited as Don't Ask. And that story was that the kid kept asking Spielberg what his character's name was supposed to be until finally he said, look, just don't ask. And that stuck. And so he became that.
I hope Captain Hook didn't get his brother Don't Tell. But
and of course, like anything with a group of kids, there has to be the tropey twins that do everything in synchronization, which I'm fine with. There's a lot of tropes in this movie, and for whatever reason, they don't bother me that much. Even though I'm much more
you're
noted.
doing a sequel. Yeah, you're doing a sequel to Peter Pan. I mean, it's you're pulling from something that's been bastardized into a million other movies at this point. Like there's going to be tropes, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's a very good point. All right, so pacing. I'm guessing that one of the things you didn't like about this movie is the fact that it's 2 hours and 21 minutes long.
It felt like a chore to watch this movie. It was tough. Oh man, it's like 20 something minutes before they get into even anything Peter Pan related. There's a lot of exposition too. Like later on in the movie, I can't remember the exact sequence, but something happens and then Peter goes back and tells the story of Peter Pan meeting Wendy for the first time. And I'm like, oh my God, another flashback story. And then there's so much to cut in here, and it always reminds me of Mallrats when Kevin Smith said, they made him cut a bunch of stuff in Mallrats at the beginning because they said if you're gonna have a movie about Mallrats, you better get them in the fucking mall. And same thing here. It's like it's a movie about Peter Pan, and it takes almost a half an hour before anything even related to that shows up, other than subtly. So, man, I appreciate them establishing the stuff, but I think it could have been done a lot tighter and a lot quicker. I don't think we needed all of that stuff to see that he's a bad parent or that, an absent parent or blah, blah, like an extended baseball game sequence. Like you could have done that in a few shots. Who the hell am I to tell Steven Spielberg how to make a movie? God. But it just felt like almost like Spielberg wanted to do all this stuff. It's I'm making a 2.5 hour Peter Pan movie, and no one was going to be like, "Yay, maybe we should cut about like 20 minutes out of this here or there."
Yeah,
it just it took, like I said, it took me 2 days to watch this. I got about an hour and a half into it, and then I did the last hour today because it was just like, man, it was dragging at points. It was definitely dragging. I can't imagine having watched this as a kid and being riveted for 2.5 hours by it. So
it is. So it's interesting. The original cut of the movie was 3 hours long. He cut it down to 220.
No.
So it was originally conceived to be a musical, and it was going to be a musical and sort of in the vein of like a Dr. Dolittle, like these really long, drawn out musicals. And Spielberg has actually, I saw an interview with him where he said, look, I was originally going to do that, and I chickened out, and I didn't do the musical. And he's like, I probably should have. I should have stuck to that. Maybe cut it, maybe not do the 3-hour musical, but cut it down and do the musical, because I think if you do that, it gets rid of some of those exposition scenes that you're talking about.
Yep.
And can tighten up the movie a little bit. But I think also, too, this was in an era of kind of blank check movie making, where studios were sort of giving a director a script and being like, here you go, just go make it, and we'll figure out what it costs later. And
so a lot like Netflix is today, basically.
Yeah, in a way.
Yeah.
And I think that if I have a knock on the movie, it is that it is 220, and while I think the pacing is okay, I am an outlier in that I don't mind a long movie, but the pacing I can also see where, especially that opening, again, 20 minutes before you're really getting, you can trim some of that up. We don't need to see Peter in his office with his office mates as he's leaving from the meeting that he wasn't going to do. Like, we don't need that at all. You get the silly, cell phone standoff that they did.
Right.
And like, because it's pointless. There's 2 minutes of screen time. You can cut that and move on. You mentioned the baseball game. We see the play. And so we're hammered home. We don't need all of that in order to know that Peter Banning is not an attentive father. We don't need him. Like, I like them getting to Wendy's house and meeting seeing Toodles and getting in, but then it just drags a little bit. It's sort of, it's kind of like it's interesting stuff story-wise, but it doesn't serve moving the plot along. And so it's like Peter Jackson deciding, I'm going to cut Tom Bombadil, where he's like, I don't want to cut Tom Bombadil from Lord of the Rings. He's a great character. He's very important, but he stops our movie and doesn't get the ring moving. And that's the story we're telling. So we're going to cut him. And then they, do that kind of, like, those are the types of things that you need to think about doing. And
we didn't need to see him on the phone again in London. Like, we've already established that he's putting his job before his family. We don't need to see it again. I know Spielberg had said that he loves the beginning of the movie, but he feels like he lost it somewhere in the middle. And to me, it's like, oh my God, like the beginning of the movie is not the good part of the movie. So I'm scared what he didn't like.
Some of the middle bits too that got cut were like scenes with Jack and Maggie, where and kind of fleshing their characters out more. There was more stuff with Jack and Hook, where Hook is kind of turning him into his own son and turning him against Peter. And there's more with Maggie, where she's more involved with some of the other pirates and kind of almost being like a Wendy to them, sort of a motherly figure as a young girl to them. That, again, I think those are interesting to think about in terms of, if it's a book, if it's a written piece, you want those scenes because that gives those characters depth. But in a movie, they needed to be cut. Yeah. And it's a bummer because it kind of makes Maggie not really much of a character.
Yeah.
But the story that's being told is about Peter. It's not necessarily about his kids. His kids are characters, but they are more there to help serve Peter's story of like what he is going through in terms of remembering who he was and incorporating that into who he is now, instead of being, the kid and then the adult. The end of it is supposed to be him kind of meshing the two and being a fully realized Peter. And the kids are there to kind of serve that story. So I can see where cutting those was important. But yeah, I agree that the beginning just drags a little. Like, skip all the stuff pre-flight.
Yep.
Because everything that you did before they get to Wendy's house, they just rehash when they get inside her house, when he yells at the kids again and he's upset about the, like, you can do all of that in dialogue and stuff from Wendy's house and cut all that stuff ahead of the Pan Am flight and you're fine. And I think, now you're closer to a 2-hour movie. And I do wonder if the movie were an hour 45 to 2 hours, kind of in that range, if it would have connected a little bit better, because it would have maybe grabbed you early.
Yeah, no, that's possible too. I mean, it's a big time-wise investment, and then it takes so long to get going. And I think having the hindsight of all these years since it's come out, it's not going to shock me what it's about. So
yeah,
I'm not like sitting in the theater in the dark now, blindsided, like, oh, he's old and like this is such a crazy twist I never saw before. This has been out in pop culture for so long, like I already know like what's kind of gonna happen. So the fact that it's kind of not great getting to that point, kind of just like, Jesus, can we get to the point, please? That I think that hurts the movie in hindsight. I don't know how it would have been if I sat down in the theater and saw it, but as somebody now 20 something years, 30 years later, I know what the hook of the movie is, and I didn't need like 45 minutes of build up to that. So
right, and that's the thing.
Yeah.
That's the thing. The inciting incident is Hook kidnapping the kids.
Right,
and we need
which
that.
was a great sequence, by the way. That was a great sequence. They come home really and the thing's stuck in the door. Like that's great. I mean, you do that 15 minutes into the movie, we're talking about a whole nother movie.
Yeah, exactly. I'm with you on that. Because there again is some of that, like Spielberg is good at making something that is family friendly but gets dark. I mean, E.T. can be scary as hell in parts. Yeah. And that scene, they come home and there's that hook mark, that slash going all along the wall and up the stairs, and you got the what's her name, Lila, is sitting there holding her head. She's been hit by something. She's screaming. Like, it's an effective scene, but it took us too long to get there.
Yeah. And that's how throughout the whole movie is kind of like that. Like there's points where you're kind of like, I guess for me watching it, I'm kind of like falling off. Like I don't know if I can make it through this thing. I'm gonna have to tell Travis like we're gonna pick another movie. But and then a Spielbergism will pop up, or like he'll pull just a great scene out of his butt somehow in the middle of the movie, and you're like, okay, now I'm back in, and the score is swelling, and you're like, okay, I see what they're going for here, and then it kind of just goes right back into bleh again. So.
Yeah, and there's some great stuff in the middle there where Peter, and I think also that middle bit where Peter is going from Banning to Pan, kind of, you could tighten that up a little bit because there's
very long.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because you get like him starting to figure it out, and the whole dinner scene is great because he starts that scene off as an adult, and by the end of it he's using his imagination, and they have the big old food fight. And it makes sense that, he would have a slight relapse where he gets scared because all of a sudden he's using a sword and he doesn't quite grasp that. But then we need to get from that back to like embracing Peter Pan quicker than they did.
Yeah.
Because the whole scene where he recounts, you're right. I didn't think about it, but you're right in that the whole scene where he goes into the little house that they built and recounts everything with Tinkerbell, it's very long.
Yeah.
And it is story that we kind of already know, so you can do that, but just shorten it, make it move a little quicker. Okay, so some alternate casting, and normally I take all this with a grain of salt. Who knows if this is actual truth or not? But it's fun to think about some of these other casting ideas. For Captain Hook, Dustin Hoffman is great. I really. Like he embodies the character so well. In fact, there was a really great quote I saw with him where he was talking about rehearsing with Bob Hoskins for the scenes with Hook and Smee, and the two of them kind of realizing that the way to play these characters is like a couple of old queens, and that they were almost like a gay couple that had just they spent all their time together, and do that, like that's how they would approach doing the scenes, and you can kind of get a little bit of that, and I liked it. I think that serves those characters really well. But here's an interesting alternate casting. David Bowie, rumored to have been thought about for the role of Captain Hook.
I don't know about that. I don't know about that one. Yeah.
It's a very different Captain Hook at that point.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it has a whole different feel than the movie with Dustin Hoffman has. It's a whole nother feel. I think Dustin Hoffman was absolutely fantastic in this, so it's hard for me to even fathom someone that's different in this role, to be honest with you. As much as I said I didn't like the movie, I think he did a great job in that role. But man, I can't see David Bowie doing this kind of performance. It would be completely different. It would be a completely different spin on what happened.
Yeah, well, my wonder is if at the time this was made, if Bowie had, because Bowie, I think when I saw him later on, like especially when you see him as Nikola Tesla in The Prestige, he's great, and I think that he grew into being able to act some of these parts. I wonder if his Captain Hook would have been too similar to Jareth, because he's only a few years removed from that.
Right, they would have been probably pretty similar role.
And plus, I also think that Dustin Hoffman brings a more of a menace to Hook, whereas I think there would be more whimsy with David Bowie. I don't. Yeah, I wouldn't see him as much of a
my
threat.
Favorite part. Yeah, that's my favorite part. I think of Hoffman's performance is that you could tell, like you said, he's kind of like Queenie, but underneath it, just under the surface, if you scratch a little bit. This guy will also cut you. So.
Exactly. Yeah, and he could flip that at any moment. You were just waiting, like he was just waiting for a reason to do that. So there was a real threat there, followed through by him killing Rufio, too.
Right.
And Ace in our chat is even saying like Dustin Hoffman as Hook terrified them as a child, and I agree with that. He's scary. The teeth too. Yeah. And which is why it's great at the end when he gets the wig flipped off his head, and we've seen that it's a wig. Like we know as an audience that it's a wig, but then to see the ridiculous hair that he has underneath there, and he's balding, and how unthreatening he looks at that point is a great juxtaposition, because really up until then he's just like, this guy could haunt your nightmares. The other one was and this one's really interesting to me, is Kevin Kline as Peter. Because Kevin Kline has that same ability to have the energy of a young person that I think Robin Williams can bring. What I don't know is if he can have the childlike innocence that Robin Williams gives. And I think because there's so much, like, Robin Williams was such a kind of just a child in his own right. Like, he was very innocent in a lot of ways. That you hear stories about, like, how he would be very nervous and very, like, self-deprecating and very worried that his performance was good or not on sets. And meanwhile, I mean, this guy, he should have had more Oscars and, like, nominations than he had. I feel like he deserved so much more. And so there was a little bit of that innocence of a child in Robin Williams that I don't know if Kevin Kline has, but at the same time, like, there's something about Kevin Kline. Because when I think of Kevin Kline, the first movie role, honestly, that comes to mind for me is Dave. I don't know if you ever saw that or not, where he plays and so, like, I can see him playing these kind of dual roles really well, which is basically what Robin Williams is doing here. He's playing Peter Pan and Peter Banning. But, like, I wonder with somebody like a Kevin Kline, the scene where he's fully embraced Peter Pan and he's talking to Tinkerbell, that's totally 100% like a little kid, right? That's a 10-year-old kid coming out of Robin Williams there, where he's even doing, like, things where he's got his face in the clock and, like, he asks her a question and then ducks down a little bit, and, like, there's, like, little things like that.
I think Kevin Kline could have done the role. Like, could he have done the role? Of course he could have done the role. But I just think everything that he brings to the table, Robin Williams brings to the table tenfold. Mm-hmm. So there's just no way to replace that. And exactly like what you're saying, stuff like that, which probably was improv on set. I don't know if Kevin Kline could do that where Robin Williams could do that in his sleep. So it's just not even worth entertaining, honestly, because there's no way. I don't think anybody could replace Robin Williams in the role. So
I will say, though, give me Kevin Kline as Captain Hook. I'm curious about that one.
Yeah,
because that could be a lot of fun.
That would be interesting. Yeah, that would be an interesting poll. Yeah.
Plus, he's a little taller than Dustin Hoffman, so he could give the physical imposition of it, right?
Right.
Which, it's funny to think about, like, you had Hoffman and Bob Hoskins and Robin Williams. None of them are very tall. And, like, they're all just little short guys, and it's just funny to think of like there is no big imposing actor, and like luckily none of the kids were very tall and went through growth spurts. I can imagine. I think it was a 2-month shoot. Could you imagine like Dante Basco goes through a growth spurt while they're filming it, and suddenly he's taller? Because he's already got the Mad Max triple mohawk hair going on.
He already was pretty big looking in this, so you're almost kind of like, well, why didn't he just pick up Captain Hook and throw him over the overboard if he's a foot taller than him? But
he was close. They were almost the same size. Apparently, Leo DiCaprio auditioned for this movie. I don't know what role. Somebody said it was the role of Jack. But Jack, I think he would have been too old for that at this point.
Interesting.
The kid that played Jack, I liked, and I always think he's been in more movies. And then I look at his IMDb credits and I realize, no, he acted for like a couple more years and then just sort of stopped acting in movies. He worked until like Can't Hardly Wait, and then he was just done.
Yeah, right. I saw that on Letterboxd. He was in Can't Hardly Wait, which is weird because I don't remember him in that. What was he in that?
I don't remember either. I haven't seen that movie in probably 20 years.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a long time since I've seen Can't Hardly Wait. Not exactly on my yearly rewatch list, but yeah, I mean, I didn't have a problem with the kid actors in this either. So, he did a good job. That's all you can really ask for when it comes to kids in movies is like, don't be distracting and don't be annoying. So, and he didn't do either. So good job to him.
Yeah. And he's got the tough part of being like the kid that, Maggie never really loses faith in her dad, but Jack does. Jack is upset with his dad. And like, you have to be,
which is weird because what did he show her to give her faith in him? Like
nothing. Yeah.
He was just as absent for her as he was for her son, but I guess he just didn't miss her baseball. He went to her softball game somehow or something. I don't know, but
he was at her play in the beginning of it.
Play.
I think some of that too is that she's a little bit younger than Jack, and Jack is like looking for that connection with his dad and not getting it, and it's sort of that father-son thing. And to be able to portray that without it getting hammy and over the top, it never got beyond what you would expect out of kid. Like all of Jack's reactions feel like, no, a kid about that age is going to react like that. So I appreciate that.
This goes back to the skill and some of the parts of this movie, the skill on display, whether it's from some of the actors or from Spielberg behind the camera, can pull that out of kid actors like that, where somebody else may have this guy might have got real hammy real quick. So
yeah. Yep, that's very true. And then, talking about skill, just those sets and costumes were unreal. Like they were so good. Even knowing it's all done on sound stages, it doesn't feel like a movie shot all on sound stages.
Yeah, it looked great. I know, it's something that's missing in movies nowadays is those physical sets. Sometimes they can look great. They do stuff in the volume for Disney stuff and whatnot, but sometimes you just miss that like physical, like it's there. Like even the actors are acting and interacting with things that are there. There's literally a pirate ship. There's literally a Lost Boys cavern place that they're jumping around and moving on. So, kudos to set design, definitely.
Yep. The half pipe that they had for the Lost Boys too with their skateboards. I like that. That was a nice touch.
Very, very, very in your face 90s. They skateboard, they play basketball while they're skateboarding.
Yeah. And I mentioned, I want to bring this up because I mentioned Nick Castle, who I always think of as Michael Myers because he was the original, but he was signed on to direct, and then they replaced him with Spielberg. They did give him a screen story credit and apparently a 6-figure kind of compensation for
so he's not upset at all.
I'm sure he's
not worried at all. He's fine.
Yeah. Like, would he have liked to direct Hook? Maybe, but hey, he got, $100,000 and his name on it. So it's good for him.
Yeah. And don't get it twisted. I love The Last Starfighter, but I think without Spielberg behind the camera, this is a much worse movie, and it's probably a very pedestrian movie as well. So
I am with you on that because I'm the same way. I love The Last Starfighter, but Nick Castle is not the same director as Spielberg.
I think even Nick Castle would admit that. I think he would be fine admitting
too.
That. So.
Yes. Absolutely. Now, I did capture some clips because there's some good like little one-liners and moments in this that I think are worth listening to. I love the insults when they're doing their insults back and forth over the table, and I got a couple of Rufios and then one from Peter that I really like. So here's a Rufio insult.
Boil dripping, beef fart sniffing, bubble butt.
Really enunciating butt. too.
But
beef
right.
fart smelling. It's important that it's a beef fart because those are worse.
Yeah.
Another Rufio.
A week-old maggot burger with everything on it and flies on the side.
Those are the insults of a 10-year-old. They're great.
Yeah.
But if you have Robin Williams, you're going to get, and I want to know how many takes they did of this.
Yeah.
Because he did it different every single time. But I have, to this day, I still can't quite do this quote.
You lewd, crude, rude bag of pre-chewed food, dude.
Like, that's quick. That's good. And then also, I love this.
Eat what? There's nothing here. Gandhi ate more than this.
That is a Robin Williams line right there. Like, that is
That
100%.
is, every now and then in the movie, you can kind of see, all right, he ad-libbed that. Like, that wasn't in the script. That came out of his head. Like,
and I had forgotten that line was from this movie, because I will say that every once in a while when you have like a small amount of food or I have nothing to eat. Like, Gandhi had more food than this. And I completely forgot that it was from this movie. Let's see. Oh, this was just terrible. This is from that scene in The Office that just needed to get cut. But it's when he's getting into the elevator.
And remember, don't let your arms get tired.
When it all is, he's going to fly because apparently, Peter Pan is afraid of flying. I was like, oh, just stop with that. That was terrible. That was bad. Let's see. What was? Oh, I got a few Hook. Because Dustin Hoffman was just great. This was a scene. Okay. I had forgotten about this scene, and it is played for laughs, but it's in today's sensibilities, this is a tougher scene.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
And it's going to be looked at a lot different, but I still had to capture this.
Don't try to stop me this time, Smee. Don't you dare try to stop me this time, Smee. Try to stop me. Smee, you better get up off your ass. Get over here, Smee.
That's a very different scene today, in sort of just the way that we look at.
That's probably not even in the movie. That's not even in the movie today.
No, not at all. Especially a movie that is largely marketed to a younger audience or a family audience. To have a scene where, look, we'll just quickly touch on this. Captain Hook is so at the end of his rope in terms of like he feels there's no great adventures left, that death is the only adventure left for him, that he is telling Smee he's going to kill himself. That I forgot that scene like at all, and it's delivered brilliantly. The timing on it and everything is great, but I was just like, ooh, 2023. That's a very different scene than it was in '91.
It's a little dark. It's a little dark for your kids' movie, but
I use good form and bad form all the time from this movie. Like, it's just that's one of those core memories that this movie put in my brain. So it's just
Bad form.
I like that. I just thought that was great, and now I have that as a sound. Hook was not bad with his insults either, because he had this little gem.
Not this pitiful, spineless, pasty, bloated codfish I see before me. That's
good. That is some. I don't know if that was ad-libbed or if that was written, but I liked it a lot.
Yeah.
I like when they're watching the baseball game, which again, like, I get where they're going for in that scene in the middle of the movie with the baseball game on the ship, which
is long,
but it does go on for a long time. But it did give us this great line after, because teaching a bunch of pirates the game of baseball from scratch.
Yep.
As a concept is hilarious to me. The costuming they had too, those uniforms were phenomenal.
And of course their team was the Pirates.
Of course.
Yeah.
And I absolutely loved that the guy goes to steal second and the catcher just pulls out a pistol and shoots him.
Yes.
And it led to Captain Hook saying,
Very violent sport, isn't it, baseball?
Very violent sport. It's just so good. And I am always one to, this here again is how Dustin Hoffman can be very threatening and very scary as Hook.
Because this is really going to hurt.
Like, that's when he's getting ready to pierce the kid's ear with his hook.
Yeah.
Ugh, And then finally, I have to. Anytime there's good, like forced or fake laughs in a movie, I get them. And Hook's laugh. I just liked that. That was some Dustin Hoffman. Like, I'm gonna have some fun with this, and he did. He had a great time playing that role. You can tell. And looking at behind the scenes footage, you could see a lot of people having a good, fun time on it. It never seemed like it was a tough movie to work on, which I like seeing. And I think that comes out in the final product. It just, I'm with you in that it drags in parts. I still love the movie, but again, I got those nostalgic glasses on. I can tell. Because I do think if I were to watch this today for the first time, I would have a lot of the same kinds of complaints. It's just the acting is great. The look of it is fantastic. The story is interesting, but it drags in parts. You need to tighten that up.
It's just the drag. It's just the length of the movie, and it needed to be tightened up a lot. I think that's really the biggest issue I have with it. And like we said, like there's masterclass performances going on in front and behind the camera. And I think sneakily, this is one of John Williams' best scores for a movie.
So good.
So, and it does. People don't bring it up, and that's probably because he has so much stuff that he's done that's amazing that this one kind of gets glossed over. But just even listening to it while you're watching the movie, it's fantastic. So, I mean, again, another masterclass by somebody behind the camera in this movie. It's sneakily one of his best works. No doubt.
Top to bottom, yes. I think what it doesn't have is it doesn't have that melody that you remember. It doesn't have the theme from Raiders or Jurassic Park or Close Encounters. There isn't that one thing.
Or Harry Potter, that one song where you're like, okay, that's what that's from. But it is good stuff.
Oh, it's very good. So now I'm curious, if you had the ability to greenlight a project for a similar style of movie, we're going to take a story maybe that people already know, but we're gonna do a sequel to it in a way that goes beyond what the original story was. In this case, we're saying, okay, you had Peter and Wendy, and we're gonna check out what it's like for what if Peter Pan grew up and got old, and what kind of story could you tell there? You don't have to go into any specifics. Does anything jump off the page? Is like, I would be interested to know this kind of a what if scenario
for anything.
Yeah, if anything pops to mind, and if that's too broad, maybe something that you liked as a kid, a story that really drew you in, and just be like, well, what if this happened? You know, what if I don't know. You could look at, like, because one that I'm always interested in is sort of the stuff around the main plot lines in Star Wars. Right? Yeah. Star Wars is such a vast, interesting world that we only get to see this little tiny slice of. And that's, I think, what I really liked about especially season 1 of The Mandalorian, was that it wasn't involving the Skywalkers, it wasn't involving Jedi, it wasn't involving Sith. Yep. It was very much kind of its own little slice of this thing over here. Another one is I'm trying to think of, like, well, Indiana Jones stories in general, because they were very serialized in nature, like more of those kinds of things, like what happened. Yep. What was the story? I mean, we get the reason for the scar that they wrote in, because Harrison Ford has the scar, but like stuff like that would be kind of neat to. That's where I think Young Indiana Jones Chronicles was such a cool series.
I loved that as a kid, and I liked that. Well, was I a kid? I don't know. I was probably like a tween. I loved it as a tween. There we go. Yeah. Man, I mean, there's just not even like Disney stuff or fairy tale stuff, but I mean, like, I'd love to see a real-time sequel to Warriors.
Ooh, that's good.
That would be like it's 2023 and the world is completely different. Like, how does all of that function in today's society? Like, that would be fantastic.
Oh yeah, because that is very much a product of its time too.
Oh yeah, no doubt. And where I grew up in the Northeast, we had when we first got cable when I was a kid. So we got 2 channels from New York City, and one of them was Channel 9 and one was Channel 11. They always played that movie on the weekends. That was their Saturday or Sunday afternoon movie all the time. That and Last Dragon were the 2 movies that were on there all the time. And I love that movie so much. And there isn't really anything for it. Like, you brought up Star Wars, but there's a whole expanded universe for Star Wars of novels and comics and video games and TV shows. And there's nothing for that. There's one video game that replays the movie. So I think that would be really interesting. It could be horrible, but if you got the right team on it, I'll go to my go-to for everything. If you get the people that made the Raid Redemption and put them all together and say, make a updated The Warriors. And it doesn't have to make sense. You want to bring all those guys from Indonesia over to New York City and film it. It doesn't have to make sense. Just do it.
No, I want this now. I want the Raid Redemption, but with themed gangs.
Yes.
This needs to happen. You brought up Last Dragon, which is great. I want to know the story of the characters in between Shonuff and that actor's character from Briscoe County Jr. being like an ancestor of his, and how he went from the Old West to New York and became the Shogun of Harlem. Like, I want to, I want that. You know, that would be a fun one to do, because, boy, Last Dragon, I got to watch that movie again. It's been too long.
What a great movie. Yep.
Well, this was fun. I'm glad that we got you back on the show, because Jaws,
anytime.
It seems to be Spielberg is our thing, I guess.
Yeah.
Although
it's tough for me to find movies I haven't seen. I got to be honest with you, because I see everything. I've seen everything. So.
I know how it goes. But we found two good ones. I mean, we found two very different versions of filmmaking from a great filmmaker that you somehow had managed to not see. So, in Jaws and now Hook. Obviously, you like Jaws a lot better than Hook.
Yes.
But this has been super, super fun. I'm enjoying this month so far. Adam last week was great, and you're here, and then we got Marcellus coming back next week. And what has he got me watching?
He'll be doing Hereditary.
That's right, which I also haven't seen, so that's going to be...
Oh, okay. I have not seen it either, so I'm interested in what you guys think before I watch it, I guess. But
yeah,
Aubrey has a giant list of movies she's never seen, because she's never seen anything. But she's struggling. She's going to pick something. It'll be great.
We'll get that. But that's going to play out the rest of this month as we do So Wizard May on Wait You Haven't Seen. And it's fun, too. We shouldn't go 2 years between them, but it's fun bringing all four of you on, because you're four very different voices in what you like and what you don't like too, which makes for really fun conversation. So I'm really glad that we have managed to get this going, and it's been so much fun having you here this week, Joey. And let people know about So Wizard.
Well, we're a weekly movie review podcast and YouTube channel. So our podcast is there every single week, reviewing new release genre movies. So your horror, sci-fi, action, superhero stuff. And then our YouTube channel is supplemental to that. So that's going to be your unboxings, trailer reactions, interviews, all sorts of stuff. And you can just follow us at SoWizardPodcast.com. Come check us out.
Yeah, and I've been on there. You got me to go see Candyman and then come talk to you about it, which was fun. I enjoyed that a lot more than I thought I would.
That was a good movie, actually.
It was
for the first 80% of it. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's been a while since I haven't watched it since then. But I'm kind of curious to go back and see it again. But yeah, you guys do some fun stuff over there on So Wizard. So definitely, if you haven't already, by the end of this month, you're going to want to go subscribe to So Wizard.
Hopefully. Or not.
I'll get them there.
Okay.
But Joey, thank you so much for being here. Now, like I said, next week Marcellus is coming in, and we're going to watch Hereditary. I'm looking forward to it. I hear a lot about that movie. There's one dissenting opinion. One of my co-hosts on Gore, who's in the chat right now, Faye, did not like Hereditary at all. I have a feeling, based on my knowledge of her taste in movies, that I'm probably going to like Hereditary. But we'll see. I hear a lot from people whose opinions and thoughts on movies I do respect. I've heard many, many good things, and I know the reasons why Faye didn't like it. And so it's not so much that it's a bad movie, just not her type of movie, which I understand. So I'm really looking forward to that. And last year I got him to watch Event Horizon, or 2 years ago, Event Horizon for the first time, and that was fun to expose him to.
I like that movie quite a bit, actually.
Yeah.
I saw it twice in the movie theater. So.
Excellent.
Me and like 5 other people, because it didn't make any money.
No, it didn't. I was one of them. I actually saw Event Horizon like its opening weekend, but I wasn't prepared for it. It was mismarketed, so I didn't like it for like a few years after my initial viewing, because I wasn't ready. I didn't know what that movie was. And then when I saw it a second time on video a few years later, I was like, no, this is really good. I had to get to that point. So yeah, we're gonna have some fun, and then we're inching ever closer to we got June and July that I'm working on scheduling before we get to Nick Cage month in August. Cage-a-Palooza is coming back, and I've got some good stuff already lined up. I am not allowed to watch Renfield until August. It's killing me. But
I think you'll like it.
I think so. If you enjoy this show and you want to catch it live, you can come to twitch.tv/tvstravis. Sunday nights, 8 p.m. Eastern time. I do the show live there. Comes out as a podcast on Wednesdays, anywhere you get your podcasts. If you want episodes earlier, you can become a patron. For as little as $1 an episode, you get episodes right away. There's also some exclusive Patreon content, as well as monthly movie catch-up nights. Patrons of the $5 and up level get to hang out once a month, and we go through the back catalog of 215 episodes of the show that I've done and pick a movie that maybe somebody hasn't seen and let them watch that, and then kind of go from there. So that's always fun. There's merch links and things at tvstravis.com. You can find links for the merch and the other shows that I do, like Those Were the Days or Gore with Phelan. So definitely check those out. And Joey, thank you for being here. This was a ton of fun. We'll have to do this again in less than 2 years.
Yes, let's definitely do this.
All right.
Thanks, buddy.
Yeah, until next time, remember to enjoy your movies, and let's be excellent to each other. This has been Wait, You Haven't Seen.
I'm not a pirate. So happens, I am a lawyer. Kill the lawyer! Kill the lawyer! I'm not that kind of lawyer.